Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I've got one of my favorite people as a guest, Dr. Terri Orbuch. We met 5, 6 years ago, somewhere around there, and have been in contact ever since. And I love her mind, and she and I like to geek out over all things relationships and studies and science and stuff. So she has been working on some studies that she'll be talking about for a long time with tons of data. And we could have 30 different conversations about the same study and 30 different little bits and pieces of it. But today we'll get in and pull apart a little bit of it and talk about how it relates to our life, and then talk about Dr. Terri's books and figure out how they and us and we all can help you guys. So hello, Dr. Terri, and thank you so much for coming back.
Oh, thank you, Hunt, and thanks for that nice introduction. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you've been doing these past years, and transitioning and maybe into more of the Venn diagram of the relationship and the science world as well too, because it's fascinating stuff.
Thank you. Well, I'm a psychologist, marriage and family therapist, a relationship date coach, researcher, and a love doctor in the media, as you know. I have been the project director, though, for a long-term research project. It's called the Early Years of Marriage Project, and it's funded by the National Institutes of Health. And I've been following the same 373 couples now for over 30 years. It's the longest study of its kind in the United States. And when the couples or partners experience divorce or the loss due to death of a partner, we or I continue to follow the individuals over time as well, because we're also interested in the factors that lead to repartnering and how do people adjust, and the effects of divorce and the death of a parent, actually, on children as well. So that's the big study. There are hundreds of journal articles and books out on this study or project, and it has rich, wonderful information that I've been able to translate and disseminate into the public as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, it touches on everything, any aspect of relationships that you're curious about, that you want to look into. Like, so much stuff has come from this study, and it's become foundational to a lot of the way that we interact. What I'm not saying, like, say maybe the most interesting, but what's like one of your favorite little snippets that you found in some of these within this large study?
Right. Well, first of all, I've always been interested, Hunt, as you know, in what keeps people together and happy and what breaks couples apart. So I think the first really interesting and almost surprising finding, given that interest, is the notion of affirmation. And affirmation is the degree to which we make our partner feel special and cared for and valued and loved. And what I found is that when partners feel affirmed often, regularly, that couple is significantly more likely to stay together over time. And what's even more surprising, and I know we've talked about this, Hunt, is that this was even more important for the men or husbands in my study than it was for the wives or the women. And what I found is that when husbands said, "I feel affirmed often by my wife or female partner," that couple was almost 2 times more likely to stay together over time. And that's not surprising that, affirmation is important. But I think what's surprising is that the men craved and needed this affirmation more than the women. And when they didn't get it, it affected the couple and the likelihood of that couple staying together. And when men didn't get that affirmation regularly, often, they looked elsewhere for that affirmation.
Yep.
So what I like to say for anyone listening is that what I think is important is that you wake up every single day and you give affirmation to your partner. And you can do it through words like, I love you, I care about you, I love you more now than when we first met, or you make my life exciting and wonderful, or you can give that affirmation through actions or behaviors.
Like you can service and all those types of things as well.
Exactly. So every single day, wake up and do that at least once.
Because a lot of people, both inside and outside of relationships, think it's the big things that matter in relationships. And it's really just the everyday small things that are what predicts long-term happiness. I just was writing an article today on signs you're falling out of love. And I quoted this study as well, too, because I wanted to talk about bids. And bids are exactly kind of like what you were talking about when someone's looking for affirmation or validation and they say something like, look at the bird, right? Now you can answer negatively. I don't have time for that. You can answer neutrally. Yeah, that's nice, dear. Or you can answer positively. Oh, that's so cool. What kind? And you had mentioned that those couples that turn towards each other's bids, that hear each other and respond to that validation and affirmation are the ones, yes, that continue to go on. And I've found that this is in all relationships as well, and not just romantic relationships. We want to share the world with people that we care about.
Absolutely.
And when we don't get that reciprocity, coming back, then it just makes us kind of like, fall down. Like, and also like, look, my wife knows nothing about video games, and that's totally fine. And I don't expect her to or want her to. It's not one of the reasons we got together. I have a friend that's a former roommate that I haven't seen in 15 years, 12 years, that we talk weekly and send each other memes about it, because that's our emotional regulation in that side. And, within the relationship, we have it on this side. And I also think and again, you and I have talked about this at length too, how important it is for men to validate other men. Because if you're a guy and your entire emotional regulation is, needed from the woman in your life, then that's going to be exhausting for her. And frankly, no one can stand up to supporting two people's emotional capabilities. And this comes into play also with the whole incel movement and things, in that, so to speak, the average man hasn't been hugged or complimented in months. And so when a woman looks at him and says, thank you very much, he's so starved for attention that he looks at that as romantic interest. And doesn't understand the nuances and subtleties and emotional intelligence or dating IQ, or however you want to put it, of all that, which then creates there's the phrase like, don't friend zone people. Well, I've heard it said the reverse, like, don't girlfriend zone people. Like, I thought I had a friend for 2 years and I poured my heart out and we shared laughs and wonderful times. And I was so happy to have him. And then he tried to move on me and I turned him down, and then he, completely disappeared. Like, how hurtful and depressing that has got to be for the poor woman that didn't realize that she was even in that position as well too. So for everybody that's listening out there, we need to compliment each other. We need to validate each other. And we need to affirm each other. And there's a difference between complimenting and affirming. Compliment can be taken as insincere or generic, or you're doing great. But I think like the affirmations and validations are when it's more specific. Like, you just got promoted. I'm so proud of you. You've worked hard. You've worked on this for so long, and I'm really proud that you got there. That's making someone feel good about themselves, I think, which is a little higher, than compliments. But we don't necessarily know how to do it as well, because we don't know what buttons to push for each other's pleasure centers. Because we don't really know what makes each other work. So, that's why I find reading all of these studies is so fascinating too, because aside from just learning all this stuff, once you understand the machinations of going on inside the machine, it's a lot easier to kind of figure out how to direct it, or at least understand the forces at play, so you can try to be forewarned. So what made you want to start writing books about this topic?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, I should say that it is the small things, and it's all about the small little things rather than the big things. So I totally agree with you in that. I mean, it leads to happiness, but it also leads to all of our relationships staying together over time. And even for parents and children, even for me as a professor and my students, to recognize and see and not take for granted my students and my kids and my friends, as you said, so important. So why did I start translating all of this great rich data and information from the early years of Marriage Project? Well, it was in 2004, many years ago. I realized that I was writing all of these academic journal articles and academic books, and nobody was really reading the great findings from this study, except my colleagues in academia at the university. That's wonderful. I don't want to dismiss that. I love it when my colleagues read my work, but I really wanted real people and real relationships to read the information and implement and include and do what I was finding. And I also realized that my husband, now who I've been married for 30 years, even wasn't reading my journal articles. So I said, okay, I have to change and do something different. So I still publish in academic journals and write academic books. But what I love even more lately is, as you said, translating and disseminating the work in public books and presentations and media articles and TV, and having people go, oh, wow, I can like science and I can use science, because science should be fun.
It should be.
Love science, I know.
And so should dating, honestly, too, you know.
Good point. So should dating. So that's why I decided to become a love doctor. And, I hired a publicist way back at the beginning, a PR consultant, and she said, nobody's going to listen to Professor Terri Orbuch, so you have to call yourself something different, which is why I coined myself the Love Doctor, and ever since have been the Love Doctor as well.
Yep, branding is important. It helps get that message out, definitely. So what are some other things, like, I know that the study's so large, and like I said, that we could talk about it, but what are some other things in it that you think people need to hear that could impact each other's daily lives? Because, like you said, sometimes hard to read. You go, great, n equals 373. I don't know what that means, and exactly. But, if you could hear something and the average listener or watcher can implement that, like, almost immediately, like, what are some things, within it, again, that you find interesting, or that might be on the easier side of the implementation, other than like long therapy sessions?
Right, exactly. And I'm going to stay with couples for a few more minutes, and then we can always get to the singles and repartnering and dating. But it has to do with the topic of communication. And if you ask anybody, everybody thinks, oh yes, communication is important. And even we asked all the couples, are you communicating with your partner or spouse? And everybody said yes. But when we looked into it further, what people think communication is as a couple, especially if you're living and married to that partner, it's asking about, who's going to pick up the kids after school, or pay the bills, or call mom, or empty the dishwasher, or get the groceries. And what we found is that that's not communication. What real communication is, which is important to happiness and the stability, staying together, is talking about your dreams, your goals, your aspirations, or your stressors. So what we decided to do with the couples, there's some exercises, and we found that this is what was important, is talking to your partner every single day about something other than these 4 topics: work, family or your children, who's going to do what around the house, or your relationship. And so if you can spend at least 10 minutes every single day talking about something other than those 4 topics, you are actually then doing real communication. And that's what will really influence your happiness and stay together over time.
And that can be even double so for parents when sometimes it's almost like 2 executive assistants coming together. Yep. One of my friends said when he first, and they had their 2 kids that right now their job was parent.co. Mm-hmm. And like, we'll get back to our we'll get back to our own relationship at a given point. But right now we have to focus on making sure that we, do this parenting thing as well as we possibly could.
I think that makes sense, right? Because, when you are a parent, and both of us are, you put your relationship on the back burner and you focus on your kids. But what I have found in this study is that you don't want to do that. Yes, focus on your kids. They are so important, and
but
it's
not to
wonderful.
The lack of.
Yes, you have to take that relationship off of the back burner and continue to talk and do real communication. So when your kids go to bed or early in the morning, just spend 10 minutes talking about something other than those 4 topics. And what I have found is that when couples do that, even as parents, even as infants, even parents who have infants or adolescents, you are significantly more likely to stay together and happier over time. So 10 minutes, that's all it takes, Hunt. 10 minutes every single day.
And it takes a little bit of practice sometimes. If it's not what you're normally used to, you might just be looking at each other going,
what do we talk about?
What do we talk about? I've found myself a little bit guilty of this, not so much with my wife, but one of the services that I do sometimes is go on what's called mock dates. I'll go on with someone's client, just sit and chat with them so they can get an idea of, what it's like, and I can see what their strengths and weaknesses are. But I can't talk about my job.
Right.
I can't talk about my wife. I can't talk about my kids. I can't talk about my house. And so I found myself being there like, have you seen any Marvel movies? I'm like, shit, like I've gotten boring.
I know. And I give this information or this advice in workshops with couples, but often the couples say 10 minutes, that's all we have to do, right? But the other half say exactly what you're mentioning is, what am I going to talk about? And I always say, yes, you can talk about movies and music and shows on Netflix, but you can also talk about some of those questions that you used to ask your partner when you were first dating. Like, what do you do on a Saturday, right? What does a Saturday look like for you? If you won the lottery, what would you do? The hard questions, yes.
This is a book that I like too, just kind of get back to too, because you may have forgotten your value systems a little bit, or they have changed over the course of your relationship as well too. Do you have favorite questions?
Yes. My favorite question is, if you won the lottery, where would you travel to and why? Or another favorite question, and this comes from, Art Aaron's 36 questions that bond or lead to intimacy, is if you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would you have dinner with, or who would you have a meal with? And you get so much information from your partner that you didn't know already. I love those questions. Sometimes my husband and I, after 30 years, I just think about that for a second, 30 years, we'll sit down and use those 36 questions and ask one another. And, we've done this 20 years ago, we've done this 10 years ago, but, we all change. And that's okay, as long as we still connect, as long as we still are interested and ask those, like you said, hard questions again and again, and get to know each other again.
Now, how do you think COVID affected everything? And I know that that's a huge question. And again, we'll be piecing this apart for the rest of our lives, at least you and me. But like with all of this sort of struggle with intimacy or struggle with couples, like what data is coming in now from the last 3+ years?
Well, such a good question. First of all, I think the data show that unlike what we thought, COVID, the pandemic, isolation, did not lead to the divorce rates going up. Yes, it led to conflict and disagreements and people redefining their relationships, but it did not lead to the instability that we thought it would. Second, I think it led to people understanding that differences do exist between me and my partner, because those differences in a home, in an apartment, were more apparent, were more seen. Whether they were differences in terms of how we handle stress, differences in what we do all day, differences in the need for space, right? I mean, we didn't know because people were leaving the home, leaving the apartments. But all of a sudden, two people were in the apartment, in the home all day, 24/7. And we didn't realize, I need a little space. But that's good. Space, time for self is good for a relationship.
Yeah.
And then I think finally it led to the notion of how do we, my partner and I, handle and resolve those differences. And that's really what's so important.
You couldn't leave the house. You couldn't go out with the boys or the girls.
And so we have to resolve our conflict, our differences, our disagreements. And as you know, Hunt, one of the things that I write a lot about is that it's not conflict or disagreements that leads to breaking up or unhappiness. There were 12 couples in my study in year 1 who said, we never fight, we never have conflict. None of those couples were still together in year 3. So it's not about whether or not you have conflict, disagreements, or differences, because we all do. It's inevitable in a romantic relationship or a relationship, right?
Yeah.
It's how you resolve and handle and manage those differences.
And like you said too, because you and I know specifically what cultures fall under those conflicts and non-conflicts too. I come from the waspy Northeast where you don't deal with conflicts. It's about obviously I'm overgeneralizing, oversimplifying, but it's about the perception. It doesn't matter if you actually have issues, as long as you don't show anybody and you sweep them under the rug and present yourself a nice facade. Whereas in other communities, that is not the case. Right. I married a Latina. And in our first big fight, she threw a beer can and I cried. And then we realized that our communication styles weren't quite on the same path. So we figured out how to, find a way so that we're both communicating, at the same point. So yeah, I think, it definitely takes some time to figure out how that communication style works too. She and I, to me, luckily, both had been in therapy individually before we had met each other. So we sort of came in with some of that communication style, like say I statements and not you statements.
Right.
Am I here for venting or advice? Learning how to be there in the correct way for each other. And it's unfortunate that it isn't, these interpersonal relationships are not taught well, if at all. Right.
If at all.
There's actually a recent study out of England, study N34, so more like a survey. But talking to high school kids about how they would like interpersonal, which leads to then dating education in school itself. Because if you don't know how to deal with each other and communicate effectively at any level, then that's going to affect all of your relationships, including your romantic relationships. So I actually have been talking to 2 researchers here in the US about seeing if the 3 of us could try to replicate that here in the States, to start basically, because it is, in my opinion, it has become a national health epidemic. the the suicide rates of men are up. There's incels going on shooting sprees and mass killings. Like, this is not just a soft skills discussion anymore. This is we as a society need to figure out a way to move forward in a better way. And go ahead, please.
Well, my third book is called Secrets to Surviving Your Children's Love Relationships, which is so similar to what you're saying. And that is, as parents, we need to set the stage and help our kids with their love relationships. And I talk a lot about the data from this study in terms of parents, and another study that I did, which says and suggests that as parents, we need to have those conversations with our kids about relationships of all kinds, as you mentioned, not only love relationships, but friendships and family relationships and relationships or interactions with teachers and other authorities, and talk to them about these relationships. But just as important, Hunt, is for parents to have and show good relationships in front of their children. So one of the things I talk about, which is very controversial, most parents think, what I found is that they should not have conflict in front of their children. And they should do it at night.
Or the let's stay together for the children type thing, which that backfires.
Absolutely. Backfires completely. We know the research on that. So I discuss and talk about the research that shows when you have conflict in front of your children and then resolve it well, they learn that relationships are about disagreements and differences and conflict. Otherwise, as a therapist, I see young adults who come in and say, my partner and I just had a fight or a conflict or a disagreement. We're not meant for each other. And merely because they had the disagreement. So it's only because of parents, as kids, they never saw their parents argue, have disagreements, or resolve any of that conflict. So yes, I think in the schools, I would love that. I teach at the university interpersonal relationships earlier. It's needed earlier in middle school, elementary school, middle school.
And it should, in a perfect world, be coming from the home. But then if we look at the incorrect statistic, but one just for that half of all marriages end in divorce, that means half of the kids, plus, we're not talking about the unhappy relationships that are getting information that isn't helpful to them at all and could be harmful to them. And so that is an argument for I agree. I wish that there were more modeling of good behaviors and things like that too. Like, one of my fantasies is to tie counseling in with medicine for all, free Medicaid. Okay, men, you can pay for your own insurance, or you can get free insurance if you have a mental health check-in once a year. Or couples, you can, pay for insurance, or you get it for free if you go to get the counseling. Because what do most people say? Like, I don't need it.
I don't need it, or I can't. I'm shamed in a way that if I do seek help from others, anybody, that somehow there's something wrong with me. And like you, I think that everyone should avail themselves to counseling, therapy, or seeking self-help in some way. It can be a religious advisor. It can be another kind of advisor. But it's great to be able to talk to somebody for a long period of time all about you and not even have to ask a question. And learn strategies to feel better about ourselves, for our mental health, and for our relationships. And I should also say, Hunt, that even if you're a parent and you're listening to this and you are not currently with your children's biological parent, other parent, you can still model having healthy relationships. It can be with the server at a restaurant, or the barista at a coffee shop, or your neighbor. That it's important as a parent, or as a grandparent, or as another family member, to model happy, healthy relationship behaviors with all of the people in our lives.
And I get this too, back to the stay together for the kids thing. Every former kid that I've spoken to whose parents did that said, I wish they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because I lived in a horrible household for 12 years. I would have rather lived in 2 happy households as opposed to 1 bad household as well, too.
Yeah. Yes, there's a lot of research on children of divorced parents out there that has found that when children are living in conflicted households where the conflict doesn't get resolved, and there's animosity and hate and name calling going on between 2 parents, that those kids have a much more difficult time adjusting, poor relationships, academic, not doing as well in schools than kids whose parents divorce. So
and I've also heard from former kids too that watching their parent date gave them a healthy template on how to date in the future, because a lot of parents think that they may have to hide their new dating life from their kids for obvious reasons, and obviously there are age appropriate conversations that should and can happen all along this. But some people say, I don't want to date until my kids are out, or I'm just going to focus on only my kids, or my kid is my life. And you know, that can end up being codependent and not healthy in that way too. And this can give you a literal way to show them how to date, to show the ups and downs, to show how we treat ourselves in the dating world as well too. So they, I've heard a lot of times, like, I was happy that my parents split up because then I also got to see correct relationship behavior modeled in front of me. So I think that's, another, I won't say silver lining, but it is another aspect that can come out that you can teach your child about firsthand. I mean, wouldn't you rather make the dating mistakes yourself so your kid can learn from them rather than having to watch them make them?
What interesting discussions and conversations you can then have with your child about what are we looking for you now in a good partner, and what's really important for a healthy relationship. Because we're just talking about dating, I should mention also that my project, the Early Years of Marriage project, that same project that we've been talking about, has found a lot of great information about what's important for dating and finding a new partnership. And I think the number one important thing is to let go of all that emotional baggage that's connected
Easier
to the
said than done.
past. Easier said than done, Hunt. Easier said than done. And I provide lots of great strategies in my book, Finding Love Again. 6 simple steps to a new and happy relationship. But when you have emotional baggage, either positive, I still want that person back in my life, I'm still pining away for that person, I'm thinking about them, or negative, I'm so upset or angry, that person is significantly less likely to find the right new, happy, healthy relationship for them. So being neutral, even as I say it, I breathe heavily. This is one strategy to focus on your breathing and let go of the anger or the desire is significantly important to finding a happy, healthy relationship.
It's foundationally important. Like you have to let it out. You have to let it go. And that's part of my job too as a coach, is I get a lot of people that after a certain time are cynical or bitter or jaded about it. And one of the things I say to them, like, if your Apollo or Aphrodite walked in right now, would you be able to earn them? Like in the headspace that you are right now? And so sort of unlearning all of that stuff is a large part of this process too. Like most dating is mental, which is great and it's horrible. It's great because it means you're in full control of it, and it's horrible because it means you're in full control of it.
Yes.
So it's learning to get ourselves out of our own way. That is most of, and this is, and one when I say dating too, is meeting new people. It's the same skill set as just getting out there, making friends, meeting people, connecting on a deeper level. And I think that one thing that COVID has done for us too, better or worse, is whittled away that which is unimportant and helped us focus on that which is important, whatever that is for you. It might be two conflicting things for different people, but and also, as you know too, like brushes with death lead to thoughts of sex and love because they're really close. I mean, they're the two biggest things in life: staying alive and making kids. They're two biggest drivers in our old biological brain. So, I have found too now that there's a lot more pushback against the digital. That people are just getting frustrated with everything out there, even before COVID, and then add to COVID, and people don't know how to balance that out anymore because there's a lot of research into the disappearance of the third place, the place that isn't work or home that you congregate and meet people. That it used to be the Village Green, it used to be the Elks Club, the Union Halls, Rotary, knitting circles,
libraries, like plus community centers.
Exactly. Yes. And since those are falling, and all of those are in steep decline, and a lot of us are getting what we ask for in the work from home or the hybrid options. We're getting what we ask for, not what we need necessarily, because that's great. I love working from home, but I know that I have to consciously counterbalance that with going out and being more social to balance that out as well too. And that's one thing I noticed during the pandemic. There's one study I like: the minimal social interactions with strangers leads to greater well-being. But basically it comes down to like, if I see you and I smile at you and you smile at me, that makes me feel happy.
That's that affirmation again, because I notice you, I see you.
And even like you're on a bus and you see an old lady trip and you see a young Ute come and pick her up and help her, and I look over at my seatmate, who is whoever, and we smile at each other, look back, and just kind of nod at each other. Our joy was lifted up. We saw benevolence, and we had a rapport over that without any real interaction, if you will. And we lost all of that during COVID. We lost all of that, and we realized how much it actually does take a village to raise an individual, not even a kid. Like, we need that. We are physiologically built to be in communities. And
absolutely.
So we had to get through this lack of community. And I think that, like I said too, like, we're realizing that I think most people are lonely and they don't know how to change that. Because even if they knew how to do it, they may feel they lack the skills to it, or it's too vulnerable for them. I realized I didn't have as many guy friends as I would want. And I know you know guys, and you can't at 40-year-old just walk up to a guy and be like, hey, want to be friends? So I started a dad's group because that was a way to get in, so no, we're just there for the kids. And this past weekend I had a dad's group, and 20 men that had never met each other all showed up in the same room at the same time with their kids and all kids' supplies. That itself takes a lot of effort. So you can see, I, as a man, I see a lot of the men's side too, and that, like, men are having a lot of problems right now. One of that being there's a lack of support amongst ourselves in validations and affirmations with each other. And so it just made me feel like like a giddy school marm walking around seeing like all these men exchanging phone numbers and talking about like hanging out and, their kids playing together. And it felt nice to be able to offer this service to people too, because even before I got into the matchmaking and the dating, it was all about, I love people. I like, what do you need? What do you want? I know someone else. Let's put the two of you together so you can both be happy and go off.
I love the idea of that dad's group. I love men's groups. I love dating, which are men dating each other, even in a non-romantic sense. I think the first step, as you mentioned, Hunt, though, is for men and women to identify that relationships are important. And the pandemic gave us that, as you said. Relationships are important to our physical health and our psychological health. And when you realize that, and then study after study, even before the pandemic, we knew that people are less anxious, they're less depressed, they're more optimistic, but they're also more likely to sleep better, less headaches, go to the doctor, they're more likely to exercise and eat well. I mean, everything is better when you have relationships of all kinds in your life. So identifying and that being the first step that you need relationships is so important. So anyone out there, Hunt, who doesn't have the friends yet or is trying to figure out how, the first step is just saying to yourself, yes, I want relationships, people, socialness in my life.
Yeah, there was one of the gentlemen that I talked to on this very podcast named Fedor Gaskin, works for the forget exactly what deep living or something like that program. And basically, the data shows that loneliness and poor mental health will kill you quicker than smoking.
Yeah,
like more years off of your body than smoking. And I do like the fact that more research is being pointed that this is a physical need, and that if we don't have this, we'll die earlier than all these things we're working on fighting, like smog and smoking and exercise and heart disease and things like that as well too. It's just a lot harder to focus on because it's a little bit more nebulous, and so I hope that we can figure out ways of moving forward, because the data is a little bit scary about what's out there right now.
I think it's not nebulous, though. I would argue that it's very clear and very easy, and there are data sets out there that show, like you're suggesting and indicating, that when you have unhealthy relationships or none, you're significantly more likely to die earlier. We know that as a fact. And data set after data set, study after study shows that that is the case. So there are data out there are studies out there, and we can study our interpersonal relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, parent-child relationships, just like we can study smoking behavior, nutrition, sleep behaviors, and how they impact our health. And that the relationship part and data are number one for our health and well-being. Absolutely.
Yep. See that, everybody? Relationships are vital to our health in every possible measure. So, even as you were saying too, from weak ties to strong ties to your family, all of these play a part in our own mental well-being. And when we have better mental well-being, we're more at peace, which makes it easier to find someone else that is also at peace and has good well-being. Then hopefully then you can, meet up and share the rest of your lives together. So, yes. I am conscious of your time and the time of our listeners. So I will wrap this up. And I know, like we said, you and I have had multi-hour conversations on this, just, because there's an infinite amount of things to discuss. And hopefully we can chat about this again sometime soon. And hopefully we'll get to see each other again sometime soon, because it has been far too long. Actually, it's only been a little over it was before COVID. It was right before COVID.
Before COVID, yes.
Yeah.
So I hope so. I would love to talk more, and hopefully we will meet each other in person soon.
Oh, of that I have no doubt. So why don't you tell everybody where to find you, follow you, your books, and etc.
Well, my website is Dr. Terri, DRTERRI, thelovedoctor.com. It's all one word. Dr. Terri, thelovedoctor.com. And on my website, you can find my 3 popular books, one on relationships, long-term relationships, one on finding love again, and one on how parents can survive their children's love relationships. And I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter. I can't remember all of them. Dr. Terri Love Doctor is my name on all of those.
So not only do I have this, I have it flagged. I have stuff underlined in it and dog-eared.
That's the book on how to keep your relationship happy. It's for real if you're in a relationship, a good relationship, or a great relationship, to take it to the next level.
Dude.
Simple, easy, practical steps to take it to the next level.
Awesome. Well, you have a fantastic rest of your day and week, and it was just such a pleasure talking to you, and I always get such a high after talking to you. I can go around, walking around my house now, like, we're going to save the world and educate everybody. So thank you for coming again, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks, Hunt.
Bye-bye.